Yeah, so the dates that I'm looking at are January 8th to January 10th. That's when I think we'll see these approval orders if Eric Balchunas and I are correct in our call, which obviously I hope we are. So that's under the 19B4 process. And then there's this other process, the S1, which is what a lot of these meetings are about. It's about like the language in these documents, what it says about risk disclosures and how these funds are going to operate. There are no real true deadlines on that. Now, it would be very abnormal if it was like months between the 19B4 approval and the S1 approval. My base case is I think that they could get approved around the same time. Like the SEC is working in conjunction, both divisions that would be approving these things. But it wouldn't be out of the question to see like a few days or weeks between seeing those approval orders and ultimately these funds listing on an exchange. So there's no set like, oh, we get approval and then like we have 2 days and these things are going to list. It could happen anywhere from like a day or two to like a couple weeks in my view. I lean towards thinking we'll have them, like you hinted at, I think they'll be listed in mid-January potentially, maybe even earlier, but there's no way to know at this point when that will be.
Welcome back to Money 101. James Seyffart serves as a Bloomberg ETF analyst, one of the two experts diligently covering and dissecting all developments related to Bitcoin ETFs. In his most recent interview, he provided a comprehensive breakdown of Bitcoin ETFs, expressing confidence that they will materialize within the 3-day window spanning from January 8th to January 10th. Don't miss the conclusion of the video, where Seyffart also shares insights on the likelihood of an Ethereum ETF and his belief that the SEC will be compelled to approve them by mid-2024. Additionally, it's worth noting that only a small percentage of my audience is currently subscribed. If you appreciate finance-related content, consider subscribing or giving the video a thumbs up. It's a free action, and you can always change your mind. Join Seyffart as he delves into his latest analysis on crypto ETFs.
So I think, yes, I think all the approvals are going to happen on the same day. That's a stance we've had for a long time. That's what happened with the Ethereum futures ETFs. I think that's what the SEC's goal is. The listings will almost be up to the issuers, right? Have the issuers got all their plumbing set up? Do they have all their third parties lined up and ready to go for this approval, which there's no way for me to know for certain. I can guarantee you that many do, like they will, just knowing how things work. But maybe some of these issuers are deciding there's too many horses in this race, or it's too much work because the SEC seems to not be allowing in kind. There's all these different reasons. But so like theoretically, the SEC is going to say, if you're ready, you can go. And then it's going to be up to the issuers and their partners to make sure they're ready to operationally ready to launch these things. BlackRock, as you know, and many people are aware, they had a partnership with Coinbase back in August of 2022. Alongside that, they announced that they were launching a private trust for institutions and high net worth individuals that want access to Bitcoin. And basically, BlackRock is going to offer this private trust. Now, it's not a mutual fund or an ETF, so we don't know what the assets are in that trust. But what we do know is that there's likely significant assets in there. And we were estimating a couple $100 million were in there, hundreds of millions we were thinking. And one of our theories was that BlackRock was just going to move that Bitcoin basically into the ETF when the ETF launches, so almost seed it. And then basically the ETF would get a jump start and have however many assets that private trust had, because there's not really a huge benefit to just leaving in the private trust. For these issuers, it'll probably be way cheaper even. I'm not sure. We don't know what BlackRock's fees are. We don't know really any information on this thing, but it would probably be more efficient to be in the ETF for most people, right? So our theory was they're going to take those Bitcoin and just import them into the ETF. And they can't do that in Cash Create, because you can't just take the Bitcoin and then put the Bitcoin in a creation into the ETF, because you can only do Cash Create. So it's likely that those private trust assets are just going to sit in that private trust until the SEC gets comfortable with in kind. So our theory was basically BlackRock was going to use that trust and those assets they already have to kind of perk up their ETF, make it look more competitive. It will be more competitive. I mean, if you come to market and all of a sudden you have hundreds of millions of dollars in your ETF and your name is BlackRock, it will have meaning. So it kind of almost like might be leveling the playing field. That said, there's no way to know from our point of view that 100% this was BlackRock's plan. But if I were BlackRock, that's what I would have been doing. And it's looking like, and based on the fact that they're one of the ones leading the charge on in-kind, again, I will go back and say in-kind is better for everyone involved at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, except for the SEC, it seems. But BlackRock has been pushing the charge here, and I think personally that maybe one of the reasons is possibly this. Yeah, so there's a bunch of issues that have filed. It's basically in the same process that the spot Bitcoin ETFs are going through. The reason we're looking at January 10th for spot Bitcoin is because that's ARK and 21 Shares first date. Van Eck, I believe, is the first one due for a spot Ethereum ETF decision. So the final decision for them is like May 23rd or 24th. So theoretically, it's possible that we see approvals by then. That said, we're nowhere near as confident in that as we are on the Bitcoin side of things. And obviously, a Bitcoin ETF approval would increase our confidence that a spot Ether ETF would be happening. So those are the timelines we're watching. The objections we've seen in the press, honestly, a lot of them I don't think are relevant because none of these applications are going to stake the ETH right now, right? So the objections about ETH staking might have more to do with the fact that the SEC might use that to call it a security and then say they can't allow an ETF, but not that like the SEC can't allow it because the trust documents in this case would just basically, they don't say that they're going to stake the ETH, right? So if it's just going to be holding ETH, it's going to be the same thing as Bitcoin, essentially. Now, obviously, a lot of people, particularly Bitcoin maxis, will argue that this is a security. My view is that the SEC has pretty much implicitly accepted Ethereum as a commodity at this point. So when the CME listed Ethereum futures, there's this whole process. And essentially, like the way futures lists, we have the CME Bitcoin futures, we have the CME Ether futures, and then there's variations, there's micro versions of that. When you do that, you have to register and you file a document, and it basically says we're registering these as this type of futures. And the most common ones are commodity futures or standard futures. Another one is securities futures, which it basically means it's a futures on a security, and that's duly covered by CFTC and SEC. So anytime anyone registers to futures, they could register for both, and the SEC could object and have said, no, this should be registered as securities futures because Ethereum is a security. But all 3 or 4 registration documents, they haven't done that for Ethereum. So that was one thing why I was thinking the SEC might be getting more comfortable with Ethereum because they're not pushing back on these things. And to go take a step back, we actually just saw a lawsuit that went to the same court that Grayscale won with some of the same judges, where basically they decided the SEC was arbitrary and capricious in allowing something. Basically, it's based on volatility. We don't need to get into nuance, but essentially the ruling was the SEC gave a letter that said these are not securities futures. They can operate as commodities futures, which have a little bit, they're more cost efficient and can be more competitive. And the SEC said, no, these are security futures. You act capriciously and arbitrariously, and you can't do this, right? So the court basically threw out the SEC's decision to allow this thing to be a regular futures contract. So now we go back to Ethereum. The SEC is not fighting this. They also now have approved Ethereum futures ETFs, which are squarely in their purview. If they want to go back and call this thing a security, then we'd have to delist every Ethereum futures contract out there. We'd have to delist the Ethereum futures ETFs. And basically, it wouldn't just be the SEC fighting against the industry. It would be the SEC fighting against the industry and the CFTC, its sister agency. So that's why I think things are more likely than not. We haven't put out exact odds, but I do think it's likely to happen in 2024. My view since this summer has basically been, I think Gensler and the SEC are pivoting on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So Bitcoin's on a tier all its own. Gensler will say it's not a security, call it a commodity. And then he won't say anything on Ethereum, but he'll call like pretty much everything else under the sun security. So I think he's kind of pivoted on Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think it's just not worth their energy to fight this. That said, they could probably pull some rabbits out of their hat to delay this thing further. It's not guaranteed that it's going to happen in May of 24. I know that was a really long-winded answer, but I just want, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for saying that. I got a lot of flack for saying that on Twitter, but my view is basically the SEC has implicitly accepted this thing is not a security at this point. Nothing saying they can't go back and try to fight that again, but I just don't think it's worth their time. It's way easier for them to go back and fight against these other things being securities, which they have put in these lawsuits against Coinbase and Kraken and other exchanges.
As a Bloomberg ETF analyst, James Seyffart's expertise illuminates the intricate and swiftly changing landscape of crypto ETFs. Seyffart's analysis and projections, specifically foreseeing the approval of a Bitcoin ETF between January 8th and January 10th, offer a sneak peek into the upcoming dynamics of the crypto market. Expanding on the potential for an Ethereum ETF and his anticipation of its approval by mid-2024, Seyffart underscores the noteworthy advancements expected in the crypto space next year. His insights serve as a guide for what lies ahead in the realm of cryptocurrency ETFs. If you haven't already, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. For enthusiasts of comprehensive finance and cryptocurrency content, subscribing ensures you stay updated on the latest trends and analyses. It's a cost-free commitment, and you can always opt to change your preferences later. I trust today's video has been valuable for you. Look forward to our next encounter, and as always, wishing you the very best.